There we go, now it's recording. Nor will the strength of trust ever allow anything to come to be from what is besides it. Therefore, neither its coming to be, nor its perishing, has justice allowed, relaxing her shackles, but she holds it fast. The decision about these matters depends on this: is it, or is it not? But it has been decided, as is necessary, to let go the one as unthinkable, unnameable, for it is no true root, but to allow the other, so that it is, and is true. And how could what is be in the future, and how could it come to be? For if it came to be, it is not, nor is it, if at some time it is going to be. Thus, coming to be is extinguished, and perishing not to be heard of. So I read through the whole page. If you have the screenshot up, you can see there's alternative translations in the second half of the page. And we're going to look at a couple of those. It's hard to understand this page without reference to the prior page. So the first line, it says, nor will the strength of trust ever allow anything to come to be from what is besides it. So what is this following on from? So the Fragment 8, the first page, what we began with was, a single story of a root still is left, that it is, that on this root there are signs very numerous, that it's ungenerated, imperishable, etc. But the end of page 1, so right before what we just read, the goddess is saying, what need could have impelled it to grow later or sooner if it began from nothing? Thus, it must either be completely or not at all. So what we have there is the goddess saying you don't have creation from nothing, right? So the point that was immediately made before the page I just read is you don't get something from nothing. And in the last recording, I said it's kind of unwise to engage in this debate about causation or getting something from nothing, because we've already established that nothing is a nonsense term. There's no meaning to it. And so there shouldn't even be a discussion of creation from nothing. Because one, creation is this problematic term, and two, nothing is just not a term at all, it's just gibberish. So creation from nothing is, you can't even come to grips with it. You shouldn't even go down that avenue of debating, can something come from nothing? Can something be created from nothing? Because the word nothing there doesn't signify anything. So it's not even a real claim, so to speak. It's like an incomplete sentence almost. And the one term that could be standing in for something, creation, is itself problematic and probably incoherent. So, I thought in the last recording the goddess is probably going a bridge too far and engaging in this discussion of, is it possible to have creation from nothing, and treating that claim, creation from nothing, as if it meant something rather than just incoherent nonsense. But I also appreciate why she does it, right? Because she's talking to a youth who's come from the mortal realm. And what does the goddess say about the youth and the mortals? Well, they name two when they should name one, right? So she's kind of adopting his language and saying, okay, you have a something and a nothing. You have an is and an is not in your account. I'm telling you that creation's impossible. You could say creation from nothing. That second root that the mortals talk about, the mortals talk about there is and there is not. Okay, well, you can't. Let's say, can you get an is from an is not? And, she's addressing the youth in his own language, and she makes a first point, which is, you can't talk about what is not, so you shouldn't even be going down this road. And then she goes that bridge too far, in my opinion, but it's fair given her audience, and says, okay, but let's go on that bridge. Can we create from nothing? Well, the people who talk of nothing and creation from nothing, they also talk about causation, right? There's a cause for it. And so at the bottom of that first page, what need could have impelled it to grow later or sooner if it began from nothing? So the goddess is essentially saying, if you want creation from nothing, then if all you have is a nothing to begin with, what could cause it to create, right? You can't say nothing caused it to create. And why would it be created today rather than yesterday or tomorrow, right? If it's coming from nothing. So there's no cause. Ultimately, I think the goddess, in her own way, I think anyone who sees that talk of nothing is nonsense would also reject causation, ultimately, in terms of metaphysics. But she's also saying here, look, let's just pretend we go on this dual track and you say creation from nothing. If in your initial start point you have the nothing, let's just pretend that's how you speak, because that's how the models speak. What would cause it to create? And you can't say nothing would cause itself to create, because nothing can't be a cause in their account. And you can't have creation without a cause in their account, because everything is supposed to be cause and effect in this natural philosophy, or have some reason or explanation. So it just sort of breaks down. You can't have creation from nothing, because putting aside the fact that nothing is gibberish, you just won't have a cause or an explanation for the creation. And therefore, you should either admit that what exists, because it couldn't have come from nothing, or you should just say that there's nothing at all, because you could never have a cause to bring about something. So that's that last line. It must be completely or not at all. So much for creation from nothing. And then we get to our part now, where it's, are there other ways to create? And so it says, nor will the strength of trust ever allow anything to come to be from what is besides it. And it's unfortunate. There's a number of different translations here. It's 8.12 to 1.3. And so you can see in the screenshot, there's several different translations. And depending on the one you pick, it's sort of a different philosophical point. And of course, Parmenides writes in a poetic fashion, or the goddess speaks in a kind of a obscure and poetic fashion. So I'm not sure if it's I don't speak ancient Greek, obviously. I'm not sure if it's a problem with the original text not being clear on what the meaning is, or because these translators, in trying to interpret a poem or present it in a poetic format, couldn't adopt very clear language. I suspect it's because the poem is not clear, and maybe all these translators themselves, of course, having philosophical interests, would put their own interpretation into it. But let's go with the body of the text first. Nor will the strength of trust ever allow anything to come to be from what is besides it. So suppose it's you can't get something from something else, because how could you even have something besides what is, if what is all that is? Because the goddess, remember, put forward two options, is and is not. And then she says, is not is a no-go, get rid of that. So it just is. And so how could something come to be from what is besides it? Because there is nothing besides what is. So that's not a question. It's not a possibility either. So we've got no creation from nothing. And we've got no creation from something else, because we can't identify anything else other than what is. So we can't get what is from some other source, and we've already struck out nothing. So sort of completes her thought there in regards to, well, if we don't have what is, can we create it from nothing? No, obviously not. And B, well, can we create it from something else? No, because if there's something else, then it already is what is. So yeah. But we look at some of these alternative translations, and it goes back to the point about nothing. Like, here's the first one. Nor will the force of truth suffer aught to arise beside itself from that which is not. So I guess that's just, again, repeating her point about you don't get something from nothing, which we already covered. Nor will the hold of trust permit that something out of what is not should come to be alongside it. It's kind of interesting, because it's almost developing a... Because look, beside it. So she's positing a what is. Okay, so there is what is. And then she's saying... she's positing a what is not, and then positing a third thing coming out of the what is not. And so it's like, because you can't have creation from nothing, we have what is, and what is will not permit something to come out of nothing and be next to it. Maybe that is a point there, at least in those translations. Nor will the force of conviction permit anything to come to be beyond itself. Well, again, nor will the force of conviction permit anything to come to be beyond itself. Anything to come to be beyond itself. Well, obviously you can't come to be beyond what is. But I guess that in that translation I have to ask, what is being referenced as the subject of beyond itself? Is it the force of conviction? No. Is it being? Well, then of course, being cannot permit anything to come to be beyond itself, because being is all that is. So how can you be beyond all that is? It's like saying there is something beyond what is. It wouldn't make any sense. Or it's making the other point that we're going to see later, which is kind of like you can't get something from something else, in the sense of you can't get a tree from a seed, because the seed is not the tree. And we can get into that because there are plenty of people who believe you can get a tree from a seed, right? But in terms of this idea of genuine creation or generation, you actually can't get a tree from a seed. The seed is not the tree. There's something about the seed that distinguishes it from the tree, that it lacks things a tree has, and the tree has things a seed lacks. And a seed can't give you what it is not. But that's going to be handled further on. But anyway, that's my initial impression of that first clause there, and some of the alternative translations, sort of continuing along that logic against creation from nothing, creation from, if not nothing, then something that is beyond what is, which itself would again be another sort of contradiction, saying that there is that which is beyond what is. So kind of eliminating these attempts at creation that go beyond what is. So it says, therefore neither its coming to be nor its perishing has justice allowed, relaxing her shackles, but she holds it fast. The decision about these matters depends on this. Okay, so, why mention justice? I mean, of course we saw justice at the gates when the youth was brought to the point between day and night and allowed to pass through. But relaxing her shackles, I guess it's talking about necessity, right? So, nor its perishing is justice allowed, relaxing her shackles, but she holds it fast. So there's something that is necessary about these conclusions about creation and generation. And we're about to read it, because the decision about these matters depends on this. So why is it necessary? Why are we saying all these things? Is or is not. But it has been decided, as is necessary, to let go the one as unthinkable, unnameable, for it is no true root, but to allow the other, so that it is and is true. So there we go. So the whole objection, or the whole refutation and casting out of generation and destruction, and the fact that this is absolutely necessary, and anyone who denies this is just double-headed and confused, is because we decided, or it has been determined, that there only is. Right? So if we go back to the beginning of this section on truth, fragment 2, what does she begin with? It's the same as the beginning of the fragments of Melissus, right? It's basically, we're going to talk about what is. How can we talk about it? Do we talk about it as what it is, or do we talk about it as what it is not? And the obvious answer is, well, we talk about it in regards to what it is. And so the goddess as well, just like Melissus, she begins by saying, well, what inquiry alone is there for thinking? One root, that it is and that it cannot not be. The other, that it is not and that it needs must not be. Obviously I cut out a little there, but you can go back and see that page in a prior tweet of mine or in the space. But the goddess as well is saying, what roots of inquiry alone are there for thinking regarding truth? That it is or that it's not. And she says, in this second page of Fragment 8 that we're reading today, it has been decided, as is necessary, to let go the one as unthinkable, unnameable, for it is no true root. So at that beginning there, what roots of inquiry are there for thinking? That it is or that it is not? She said, let go of that second root. You can't talk about something as if it is not. It doesn't make any sense. It's just nonsense. There is only one path, that it is. And we saw this sort of casting out of the second path. Again, the second path is only mentioned because she's talking to the youth, right? And the youth is coming from the mortal realm where they talk about two forms when they should only name one. But again, at fragment 2, right after that, she says, "Now the second path is totally unlearnable. You can't even point it out." Again, in what other fragments we got here? In fragment 6, we see it as well. Nothing is not. I refrain you from that root of inquiry. We see it in fragment 7. Restrain your thought from this root of inquiry. And now in fragment 8, the second page of it, she's saying, "It's been decided, as is necessary. Let go of is not, because it's unthinkable and unnameable, and it's no true root at all." And so, at the end of page 1, we had the discussion of creation from nothing. Beginning of page 2 here, we have if you can't create from nothing, can you create from some other thing that is besides what is? No. Again, there's just what is. And why are we really going down this road of denying generation or creation? Because it has been decided, as is necessary, that speaking of what is not is just unthinkable, unnameable nonsense. So there only is. And if there only is, these are the ramifications. We saw some other ramifications on page 1, and we're going to see them throughout this fragment. But one of the ramifications is, if there only is what there is, then creation and destruction are impossible. So let's continue. So we've, again, and this is also interesting to me, because in many interpretations of Parmenides, people struggle with what to make of that second root. Right? Why is a goddess offering two roots? And in my personal interpretation, and I've always said there are many interpretations. It's not like I have the monopoly on what the goddess really means. But in my interpretation, the only reason the goddess begins by saying, two roots of inquiry, that it is not, is because she's addressing the youth who's come from the mortal realm. And she has no intention of claiming that second root has any meaning at all. It's just a confused gibberish, like a string of letters that doesn't go here. And that the mortals, to quote the poem again, they name two when they should name one. They wander double-headed. They're confused. And so that's why here as well she's saying, let go of that second route as unthinkable and nameable. It's just nonsense. So then she continues this line of thought about creation and generation. How could what is be in the future? And how could it come to be? For if it came to be, it is not. Nor is it, if at some time it is going to be. Thus coming to be is extinguished, and perishing not to be heard of. So I read 3 sentences there. There's a lot that could be said of it. But here, I'm going to tell you how I interpret this. So we've heard 1. Creation from nothing is nonsense because there's no second root of it is not. And even if we pretended that there was and went down this track, the people who are confused about that, they also believe in causation. And, if they think there's just nothing, then how will they have causation for there to then become something? They won't have a cause or explanation or reason, so therefore there should just be nothing, and that should be the end of it. But again, of course, we should never have gone down that track because there is no second root. It's just nonsense. Then she said, well, okay, we have what is. Can something come to be from besides or beyond what is? No, because there's nothing else, right? There's just the one path, what is. And when you posit something next to it from which it could be created, something, whatever is next to it would actually be part of it because it would be something. So therefore it would be part of what is. It would be on that one root that's left, that it is. So not only do you not have creation from nothing, but you don't have creation from something that's next to being but other than nothing. Because if there was such an affirmative thing, it would actually be on that path of is. It would be part of being. And now we say, people say things can come to be in the future, or they were in the past. And so now we've got to ask, all right, why are you even talking about the future? How could what is be in the future, and how could it come to be? For if it came to be, it is not. Nor is it, if at some time it is going to be. And here's the key, right? So she's going to criticize these ideas of talking about future and past in a presentist manner. I think we can still interpret her in an eternalist manner, where no future time or past time is created or destroyed. It just exists as a kind of a complete whole or a complete story that's unchanging, like a pre-recorded movie almost, or a book or something. But her point is, if it came to be, it is not. Nor is it, if at some time it is going to be. So if I say, for example, I have a seed and I plant it in the ground, and the tree is going to come from it. Well, when I'm planting it in the ground, the seed, what is the status of the tree? Right? We have to ask ourselves, what's the status of the tree at that time? In an eternalist time frame, the seed and the tree, they exist side by side, like the moments exist side by side equally and absolutely. There's no, like, one point in time is not generated from another. It's actually a complete whole. One just follows from the other, but they sit next to each other and they both exist to the same extent. But what the goddess's concern here is, I think, is with people who have a more presentist view. They think only the now exists, and that the now will then become a future moment with all the things that are contained in that future moment. And so when we say, if it came to be, it is not, nor is it, if at some time it is going to be, let's go back to that example of the seed. We put the seed in the ground and we ask, what's the status of the tree today? If we're a presentist, the tree is not, right? Because we only think that there's a now, and we think the future is just a potential or something indeterminate or something yet to be created. So the tree is literally an is not, which is a direct contradiction, right? Because we would be saying there is that which is not. There is not is. It's a direct contradiction. So she's saying, if it is coming to be, then it currently is not. And we've already banished this talk of is not. Therefore, it's not going to work. So that's how I'm reading that right there. And of course, the presentists and others will come up with ideas of potential and actual and the like, which I think is all, cope. But but I see that line as being the goddess essentially saying what I'm saying. It's if you have a presentist view where only the present exists and the future is just an indeterminate potential of some sort, then the actual tree does not exist. And if you are saying that there is that which is not, namely the tree, then we have a problem. Because it's a contradiction to say that something is that which is not. It simply is. And again, it has been decided, as is necessary, to let go of this talk of is not. So I think she's identifying a problem there with things coming to be. Because in order to come to be, you have to be what is not. And you can't be a not. You have to be something. You have to be an affirmative thing. And then she says, thus coming to be is extinguished and perishing not to be heard of. And fair enough. I mean, the first clause there is the one she's really been harping on the strongest. Coming to be is extinguished. Because, of course, that's what's been the focus of the prior sentences. But perishing not to be heard of. She didn't say that much about perishing. Destruction. I suppose if you have a now and you put the seed in the ground, when you have a tree tomorrow, I suppose the seed is supposed to have perished, right? But then you're still saying there is this seed that is something, and now it is not. The goddess doesn't really spell out the second clause as well as she harps on the first clause of, making what is not what is, namely a tree that is an is not into an is. That's coming to be. That's been extinguished for the reasons discussed in detail. Why is perishing not to be heard of? Again, she doesn't spell it out as much, but perishing is not to be heard of because if the seed is, how can the seed be and is not? once you are something, that's what you are. There's no other option. You can't be something you are not, and you can't become what is not. It doesn't make sense. So therefore, perishing is banished. You can even think of it in a sort of a more spatial sense. Like if you have a seed within what is, where are you going to put it other than what is? It remains within what is, right? There's no other place to put it. We only have one root because we let go the root of is not. So, you have what is. That's all that is. There is what there is. And then you want to make something perish. How would it be possible to describe this process? Because not only is the conclusion incoherent, because you're going to say that there was a seed that now is not, but also if there just is what there is, where are you going to push the seed? There's nowhere else to put it other than within what is. There's no other place for it. It's going to remain in what is because there is only what there is. So I agree with her. The coming to be is extinguished and perishing not to be heard of. But I think you'll find that people point out that the second clause is not as clearly or as explicitly argued as the first clause against coming to be. Again, I wish I had more time today and had felt up to it to do a little research into the secondary source material, because obviously there's a ton of secondary source material commenting on Parmenides. And this is one of the points they make, that the goddess did not as clearly or explicitly argue against perishing. But I think it all follows from that clause in the middle of this page. It has been decided, as is necessary, to let go of the one as unthinkable, unnameable, in which case we are only left with what is, and that's the truth, that there is what there is, and there's really no changing to any place other than is. That's kind of the end of the story. It is what it is. That's kind of the beauty of the goddess's teachings, right? So that's the first 2 pages of Fragment 8 in the Phoenix Pre-Socratics version, and that's where she deals most clearly with the question of generation and destruction, I think. It was mentioned elsewhere as well, but the next section is going to be the other necessary inferences that follow. If you were here for the reading of the first page and commenting on it, we did actually have an interesting discussion. Ancient was commenting a lot in that space. You'll see that at the beginning of Fragment 8, she lists a whole bunch of necessary inferences that follow from there only being what is, rather than what is and what is not. And so we've dealt with the first ones she mentioned. So what did she say? She says, what is ungenerated and imperishable, whole, single-limbed, steadfast, complete, nor was it once, nor will it be, since it is now altogether one continuous. Right, so we've dealt with the ungenerated and imperishable lines, because what did we do? We banished coming to be, and perishing is not to be heard of. So she's satisfied the promise, the first 2 promises there, ungenerated and imperishable. And as you will see next time I do one of these spaces, the next page is going to be starting with the line, nor is it divisible, since it all alike is, nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together, nor is it somewhat less, but it is all full of what is. Another very important observation from the goddess there, mostly because, already it's radical enough that we've shut down any sort of absolute form of change and necessarily enforced a sort of an eternalist model, if any model at all, of change or time. So not only have we basically flipped the table and destroyed 99% of philosophy out there by indicating that change as they typically understand it is all nonsense, but next we're going to see that any attempt of a hierarchy of being, saying that something is more real or less real, is also nonsense. I should save this all for next time, but this is another huge point. Like if people want to be a Platonist and say there's a hierarchy of being and some things are more real than other things, she's basically also going to eliminate all that. If people want to say God is more real than creation, it's eliminated. Obviously creation is already eliminated, but also the idea of a metaphysical hierarchy and things being more or less real, that's the next thing on the chopping block that's about to be just demolished. Because essentially, if there only is what there is, what could be used to dilute it? What could be used to cut part of what is off from another part of what is? There's no way of diluting it, no way of concentrating it. It's like a well-poured substance, right? What is absolutely at every single point in every single way, because there is only what is and nothing left to dilute or concentrate or cut it up or in any way sort of pervert it or harm it in any way. So any talk of a hierarchy of being, gods being superior to creation or anything like that, if it's meant in an ontological sense, is just total nonsense, and the goddess just completely overthrows that. So it's a fantastic poem. But I'll leave it at that. I've already kind of rambled on for, how long have I been here? This looks like I rambled on for about half an hour. I'm glad we got through this page. I am trying to get through the whole series of fragments, because then when I get through this, I can move on to some other projects that I had in mind. But it's been a pleasure reading it. If anyone wants the mic or has anything to add, if we have any Platonists, shaking their fist at the phone, feel free to give me an earful. Any Christians who are going to tell me that creation from nothing or creation from something that is next to being, such as their god or something, is the truth and I've got it wrong or the goddess is a heretic, please feel free to ask for the mic and I'll give it to you and you can tell me you're wrong or maybe you agree. But I'll give it a moment if anyone else wants to talk. Otherwise, I'll close out the space. All right. Well, fantastic. We got through it in record time. Like I said, usually these spaces go for about 2 hours or so. I want to say hour, 2 hours. But I was really short for time. I'm a bit tired today too. So I'm glad we got through the page. And in theory, in about a week, I'll make another one of these spaces. And we'll go to page 3. Again, fragment 8 is about 6 pages long. And then after fragment 8... what do I have on the reading block here? I'm not going to go straight into fragment 9. I think what I'll do is, there's actually a fragment that it's debated whether or not it's a genuine fragment, but it comes from Plato. And I think it's a fragment. I think it makes sense. And I think the place to put it would be probably somewhere in fragment 8 or right after fragment 8. It would be a pretty nice place to put it. And so I think maybe after we've done with 8, we'll go to what's called the Cornford fragment from Plato. And then we'll do fragment 9. And, of course, at that point, we're getting into the way of seeming. And the way of seeming is, for me, maybe... Well, for one, it's not as well preserved. And 2... it touches on a lot of very specific, almost scientific and medical and other, and other such specific topics. And I don't want to pretend that I have as strong thoughts or opinions on it as I do of the way of truth. But just to close out this space, do remember that what did the God promise that she would teach us or teach the youth at the beginning? She said, "It's right that you should learn all things. The steadfast heart of persuasive truth," so that's what we're talking about, this path of it is, "and the beliefs of mortals, in which there is no true trust, but nevertheless you shall learn these things as well, how the things which seem had to have genuine existence, permeating all things completely." So the way of seeming is still important, because whatever meaning is contained in the way of seeming, it must have genuine existence. It must be contained in that steadfast heart of persuasive truth. It must be contained in what is. And so I think the great challenge of philosophy that unfortunately I don't really see picked up very often, and I'm certainly no great philosopher, but is to take all the meaning of the way of seeming, or all of our philosophical, scientific discoveries and our personal experiences, and fit them into the way of truth, where the goddess has overthrown creation or generation and destruction. She overthrows any hierarchy of existence in terms of things being more or less real. She's kind of said, this is the truth and this is the nature of the truth. And then she said, well, we can talk about the way of seeming, which is going to be coming up once we get through Fragment 8 and Cornford Fragment. Well, here's the way of seeming. Here's what things look like to us. Here's all your latest scientific theories. They must have genuine existence to the extent that they mean anything at all. And therefore, you're going to have to take all of that info about the planets and the generation of children and, everything here, the Milky Way and the hot strength of the stars, etc. All that, to the extent that it means anything, you're going to have to get it to comply with the truth. And I've told you the nature of the truth in Fragment 8 and elsewhere, from Fragment 2 to Fragment 8. And I think that's a huge challenge, but I think that's what's required. So, I think the way of seeming is still important. It's just sadly it's more fragmentary, and I don't recall it really giving a clear account of how it's supposed to be put in accord with the way of truth. Only that it must be, because it must have genuine existence, and the only genuine existence is what is. That's the path of truth. And also this point is made by Melissus as well. If you, I keep referencing Melissus just because I like Melissus as well. He's another Eleatic thinker. I'd like to think that my interpretation of Parmenides is at least somewhat Melissian. But Melissus as well says, if you want to talk about fire and water and earth and metal and whatever, and this comes to be that and that comes to be this, whatever. But whatever is said, all these things must be as the one is. It must comply with the nature of what is or being. So whatever you have to say about fire, water, earth, etc., it's all nonsense unless it is as the one is. It is as being is. It complies with the nature of being. Again, that's my interpretation of Melissus, and not everyone shares it. But I like to think the goddess is making the same point there. The way of seeming has genuine existence. That means it is as the steadfast heart of persuasive truth is. It complies with the nature of being. That it is. And I've rambled much too long, so I'm going to end the space there. Thank you for joining in. I always chuck these up on YouTube, so I'll do that. And next week we'll be around for another page of Fragment 8. And I am going to go get my kids to make dinner and hopefully get some sleep at some point. Bye.